Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget you can read my work on ESPN.com. I had a story up over the weekend just about what Washington's done to help Jaden Daniels, just surround him with more, and I think you know that, but also retaining their own staff. Like, why is that such an important thing? So I think that's kind of obvious, but I talk about it in this article. So go give that a read on ESPN.com. Also on Tuesday, I'll be back with another episode talking to Santana Moss. Talked a lot about like Clinton Porter's coaching, Deshaun Jackson coaching. Could he have ever seen that? But why he's not surprised about Clinton, and also going over the receivers. That they added this year too. So, and just the group in general. So, anyways, that'll come out on Tuesday. But today, I'm going to continue my second part of the series, Better or Worse, looking at each position group. Now I'm focusing on the defense. Did the offense the other day, so that came out on Thursday. Go give that a listen if you haven't done that already. And clearly the offense is better. It should be, and I think the defense overall is better. The question is by how much. So let's start with the defensive line. Is it better or worse? I'd say it's better, definitely better. And I think they've gotten more guys. I think the floor is higher than it was last year, 1 through 9. I think, last year you may see more, you may have seen a drop off. I didn't think the depth was that great. And I think the depth is much better this year. I also think they have more versatility this year, getting guys like Goldman, Kinlaw, Dietrich Wise, Jacob Martin. I just think they add some versatility. And I think you can run a few different packages with that group. You have some bigger guys inside as well, Kinlaw, and then Goldman for sure add more size that they desperately needed. And I think that's going to help. It's going to have a trickle down effect on how they can use other guys like a Johnny Newton. Newton is an undersized defensive tackle. And when you've taken on double teams constantly at 280 pounds, it's tough. So this frees him up to be more of a three technique, maybe more of a pass rusher in various situations. So I think there's a good trickle down effect of what they've done this offseason. Is it a star-studded line? No. Is it the best in the NFC East? No. You'd have to say right now it's clearly would put it at number 4. But is it better than it was last year? Yes. So let's take a look at a couple things. First of all, there's so much talk about the edge rusher, and it's almost become this outsized conversation about what they needed because first and foremost, they had to stop the run this year. If they did not get better against the run, if they found an edge rusher but didn't get better against the run, you wouldn't have seen a whole lot of difference in the defense from last year. So let's start with that. Now, do they still need an edge rusher? Could you need another guy? Yes, of course. And you can always add pass rushers. Like everybody always wants to find more pass rush help. This team is no different. So I do believe they are continuing to monitor the free agent defensive ends. You still have Von Miller out there, Jadeveon Clowney, Zadarius Smith. I think one thing I would say is I don't sense that anybody's in a rush to sign or be signed, right? Just because I think with veterans, they kind of like to take their time, see what situations develop, maybe where they have a better opportunity, and also to avoid spring practices. Like that's kind of a deal with these veterans. Like they're not thrilled with voluntary stuff. And so, you get a chance to stay at home a little bit longer, get into camp when you need to get ready, right? And if you're a situational guy, it's not going to be a big deal to pick up on what they need to pick up on. And, you have to get used to a little bit of timing here and you have to get used to like some of the blitzes if you're an edge rusher, right? All that. But that's why like there's not this massive rush by certainly by the pass rushers to get into camp at this point, but they're still going to monitor and I still think like with Von Miller, I've talked about him a decent amount just because like there's some people in Buffalo who, very familiar with his game or like they're not sold on him anymore as far as what he can do. However, other coaches that I've talked to still feel like he can add some value to a team. And just as a situation, he's not going to be come in and be a double digit sack guy. That's not what he's going to do. But can he come in and be a productive situational pass rusher for you and also a guy who has Super Bowl experience? Like that's also a key. So that's something that he could provide value. Somebody else pointed out to me that when Quinn was in Atlanta in 2016, they brought in Dwight Freeney. He only had 3 sacks, but they felt like he contributed just because of that Super Bowl experience he had in his background. So, and also as a pass rusher. So like I think there's a value that can be put on to getting a guy like that beyond just the sack totals. Are they going to find a guy now that's going to scare offenses? Well, no, like that. Von Miller is beyond that point. Smith is not at that point. Now, I think Smith can offer some inside rush as well. Clowney is not at that point, but can they help? That's going to be the key. You're not going to find that scary edge rusher at this point, for sure. Um, Look at, I would point to the Eagles last year. Their defense was terrific. They didn't have anybody with more than 8 sacks. They do have a top defensive tackle in Jalen Carter. He is much better. His forte is stopping the run and being disruptive in the middle. And he can be disruptive a little bit in the pass game, but he's not going to get you a lot of sacks, right? So you need guy, and Washington did a pretty good job with their sack totals last year. I think just trying to put it in perspective, I think the number one thing they had to do was improving against the run. They were one of so just why is it so important to improve against the run? Well, last year of the top 10 teams who defended in terms of rushing yards allowed per game, of the top 10, nine made the playoffs. Of the bottom 10, one made the playoffs, and it was Washington. So you don't want to risk having to do that again. So they had to get better there, and that to me is what they've done. It's why I think they're really good. They're going to be better in that area. So I want a couple stats here too, just as a comparison for the Eagles. While again, more about the run. The Eagles both teams faced three, in 3rd and 3 and less, right? This is where it really was pronounced to me when you can't stop the run and you have smaller guys trying to rush the passer too. 3rd and 3 or less, the Eagles faced that situation. It was 57 times, 30 runs, 2.4 yards per carry. Washington faced it 62 times, 35 runs, 4.7 yards per carry. So just one of those little detail things for sure. So anyways, I think I've made the point. And sacks per dropback, Washington was pretty good in that area. So they were top 10. And so I think like they did a good job there. It is important to get that, but I think they're in good shape regardless. And let's talk I'll start with Eddie Goldman. He's got the size. He's a big fella inside. He can play over the nose. That frees up guys like when they can run more of those the 3 defensive tackle packages, and it allows a guy like Johnny Newton to not play over the nose and to play over in a 3 technique situation because of Goldman. Now, Goldman, like, if he's that good against the run, why did Atlanta let him go? Well, they had a couple guys behind him that they like, hey, listen, you got these young guys in the roster. Goldman's getting up there a little bit. He's not going to help you in the pass rush, but he can still stop the run. So they had some guys they felt like could do what he did, but their defense got better against the run when they put him in and played him more last year. So it wasn't a matter of that he couldn't play. It's that they just felt like they had options behind him. And Javon Kinlaw is the big one, right? That's the big one they added. And I know there's always been a lot of talk about the 15 million per year. It's not 15 million this year. It's 7 million against the cap this year. Next year goes up to 18. So if he has a good year, then you're fine paying him 18 million next year. That's a pretty good deal if you get a good productive interior lineman. And I keep going back to, like, first of all, I know people keep asking about this, and I've been talking about this. They do plan to use him inside. Like, they're not putting him out as an edge guy. There may be some defensive looks where they do that. Maybe in those big nickel packages, you get Duran, Goldman, Newton, and maybe you can put a Kinlaw as a defensive end to create maybe more of a pass rush situation. But the plan has been to use him inside, which is where he has been. He's been a little bit inconsistent throughout his career, right? And there's injuries have been a factor, and I think that's one reason why they wanted him, because they feel like the injuries have contributed to that inconsistency. So we'll see. I do know that this is a group that knows him very well because they had Adam Peters was there. Daryl Tapp coached them, and then Dan Quinn is a defensive line guy, right? So they know what they're getting in him, and they know they are excited about how they plan to use him. He can be a help in the pass rush, especially. He's quick inside for a big guy, and I think that gives him an advantage. So again, just can they get a little bit more consistency out of him? But he gives them that size inside, and another guy that can get you in that 5 to 7 sack range. For sure. Dietrich Wise, like him, just a good pro, can help. And it's funny because, like, you talk to some, it's like he can't set the edge. Some say he can set the edge. These guys feel like he can. So, and he can rush the passer a little bit. Again, another guy who could be, they have multiple guys who could be in that 5 to 8 sack range. Last year, they had 3 of those kind of guys. This year, you could have 5 or so of those guys. So that pass rush could be on paper, when way you look at it, the pass rush could be spread out among more guys. So you have more guys who can do something. You just don't have that one guy who can scare you. And they didn't have that guy last year either. So it's not like that was something else. And I also think one of the other underrated things with this group is I think they feel like they have more guys who will adhere to what they need them to do on the field. I don't think they felt like that last year, and there are a couple guys who are gone. So I do think that they feel like they have more guys like that now, and that can also help in various situations. So, but I like the Jacob Martin is a guy who's got a little bit of a juice as pass rusher. He's not, again, not going to get you double digit sacks. At least, you don't look at him coming into the year like that, but can he get you 5, 6 sacks, right? Again, another guy in that range just to give you another threat out there and add to the versatility of what you can do. Um, you can also help with the blitzing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So but the group needs to improve against the run. If they don't improve against the run, you're going to see a tough season this year. And that's the bottom line. So that's where their focus was. Now it's funny because they just want to bring in good players, they'll say, but clearly these players all came in with, they add size and they got a couple run guys. And guys who can maybe help a little bit more against the pass. Just again, not scary guys for the offenses, not guys that you're going to have to worry about on every snap. But if you have 4 guys like that, where it's like, okay, if you leave these couple guys one on one, can they win their battle? That's what you need. And I think they have some of that, but we'll see. But again, better, how much better, we'll see. Linebackers to me are the same. And that's because it's pretty much the same group. There was one addition. He's a 6th-round pick. We'll talk about him in a minute. But Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, I think where Wagner can be helped, this is where he can be helped. They did a poor job last year setting the edge, right? And some of that was Dante Fowler. It was not a good edge setter. I think I like Dorrance Armstrong, Clue, and Farrell coming back. I should have talked about them. But I think Dorrance is just a good pro. If Farrell is healthy, now you have 2 guys who can set the edge better than what we saw last year. And I know they were both out there last year, but Farrell was dealing with knee injuries, et cetera. But if you better in that area, then it gives Wagner better ability to you. First of all, you force the guy to bounce wider, right? So now you're giving a linebacker who's up there in age and is not as quick as he used to be, smart, but maybe not as fast as he used to be, I should say. That gives him a little bit more of a time and an angle to get over to that ball and use what he can still do, which is anticipate, play with instincts, and get there now, maybe a better chance. Or now you're forcing the run back inside. So that edge setting is key, and it can help Wagner in particular. Then you got Frankie Louvu, very good pass rusher, very good blitzer. Neither one of these guys at this point is what you want in coverage. So that's an area where they have to improve in, but they can both blitz. And I think that's something that we'll see a lot more of this year. So how do you then help with the coverage? I think that's where you have to have guys like, and I'll get into in a minute in the safeties, but Kane Madrano, like 6th-round pick. One thing that he's going to that he can help in eventually if he hits. Like we don't know what he's going to be in the NFL. We know what he was in college. Like he's a guy who he runs like a receiver, runs like a safety. He's got that in his background. But here he can be a big nickel. And so but can he cover and when? Or is he going to come in and be a special teams guy and develop into that cover guy? That's also very possible. But when does he get to that point? But he adds to what you can do defensively if he hits, because now you have a guy who can fill that big nickel role and give you a little bit more size in there and some coverability than what you have at safety. I think a couple keys, Jordan McGee. I really liked what we liked what we saw. I liked what I saw from him. They liked what they saw from him last year. He got hurt, he missed too much time with injuries. How does he develop? Because if he does, then it gives you more depth. And I think that's where this group could be better is if Madrano hits, if McGee does what he can do and improves, and Dominique Hampton in year 2 at linebacker improves as well, because maybe he could be that big nickel type of guy, right? So that's where this group can get better is the depth developing, because Wagner is who he is at this point, still a very good leader and a guy that you want in that locker room. Louvu, I think, can be a little bit more productive in the pass game with some of these blitzes, especially if behind this group up front. Can he be a little bit more productive? I think he probably could be. But I think where this group can get better is in that depth area. And I think that's where they're going to have to get better because then I think if McGee develops, now you have a guy who can replace Bobby Wagner perhaps after next year, right? You don't want to do that right now because they still value what Wagner adds. And they're still like, you still want to see a little bit more from McGee to say, okay, he can be this guy. But another year behind Wagner cannot hurt him. So, anyways, let's get to cornerbacks. They're better. We know that, right? Because they were not very good last year. So why are they better? Obviously, well, drafting Trey Amos, signing Jonathan Jones. Excuse me, there's a bug in my face. Signing Jonathan Jones, I think he's just a good pro, and he's a Dan Quinn type guy, right? So whether he's starting or not, if he's your fourth corner, I think he's still a good addition because he can play. But Trey Amos is going to be a big key here. And I'm going to get to Marshawn Lattimore in a minute because he's an even bigger key. But Amos is key because he gives you something that you needed. Another outside corner opposite Lattimore allows Mikey Samerstill to get inside where he is best. The question is, does Amos come in right away? Does he win that job right away? Or do you use Jones and or Samerstill outside and the other one inside as Amos develops? Regardless, you have more flexibility. I think you have more quality to choose from in those areas. And you also have Noah Igbenogany coming back as well. So who is solid for them last year as a backup. But I think that's where, but Amos really, I really like that pick because I think, first of all, I think he can play. And I think he gives you a tough corner. He gives you some ball skills. He gives you some length. I think he's competitive. And so I think all those things are really what they wanted in a corner, and it's what he gives them. And then the other factor is if Marshawn Lattimore continues to have injury issues, then you have enough, but if he has to miss games, you still have a true outside corner and you're not playing with two smaller guys on the outside in Jones and Samerstill. I don't think that would be ideal. But I do like, again, moving Samerstill inside where he is best. And then with Lattimore, um, a big key will be the health. He's only played 26 games over the last 3 years combined. Like that's a tough one, but they gave up a lot for him. And we know the hamstring injury limited or impacted his season for sure, whether in New Orleans and then here. And even when he came back, like you don't know what it's hard to know is what was the impact of him coming back? Was he was healthy enough to play, but where was he at in his game? That's what we don't know. And it's what they're banking on. And like everybody I talked to over there is pretty confident in what they have in him and they're excited about him still. But there is that injury history and it's real. And so you don't get healthier as you get older. And he's had long-term issues with those hamstrings. So if he can stay healthy, and that's an if. But if he can stay healthy, he can be still a good corner. He doesn't have to be an elite corner anymore. That's not where he's at in his game, I don't think, for sure. But I think he be a good corner for them. Like what he adds when he's just good is good, right? Physical, competitive. I mean, he will he's he's competitive, man, and that means tough, right? And physical against the run, even. We saw against New Orleans, he shut down a side, but then you saw against like AJ Brown, in the first meeting against AJ Brown, he had some really good plays against him, and then Brown got him a couple times. But he did have, it wasn't like it was every play, every game. Like there were plays that he made that were just really good. Can he make a few more of those? And when you're healthy, like when you're healthy, when you're more comfortable and you're with the defense, et cetera, that's when can we see a better version of that. But again, he's got to be on the field because if he's not, then I don't care. That all goes out the window. He's got to play more than 9 or 10 games next year for that trade to have been a good one for Washington. But again, if he is healthy, they can be a good player for them and just gives them a guy. But he can't, you can't have those meltdowns on the field if things aren't going well and kind of take your head out of the game a little bit. But they brought him in here to play those big receivers, the AJ Browns, the CD Lambs, right? But now I think they have guys who can match up a little bit better if you're playing, they have the Devontae Smiths, the Malik Neighbors of the world, right? So I think they have a little bit more versatility, and that's going to depend on how quickly Amos can kind of show that he can be a quality cover guy in the NFL. But I like the depth better, and I think, you know, Jones is a Dan Quinn type guy. I don't think St. Juice was a Dan Quinn type guy. I think he had length, he had skills. I don't think he had that confidence with him, right? So I think they're in a better spot now. It just they need Lattimore to stay healthy, and we all know that. And then safety. Safety is the last one. And, it's funny. I kind of went back and forth on this one. And I talked to my guy Logan about this as well. And initially I had, well, they definitely took a step back, right? Because they lost Jeremy Chin. I don't think it's that big a step back, though, not especially after talking to Logan, but I don't think it's as big a step back as what I initially had thought, only for a couple reasons. I think it's hard to say. You could even make the case that maybe they're about the same, but I'm going to go with a titch back because Chin helped them as he progressed throughout the year, was physical, and did a good job against, and coming down to the box. He had that size to play down there. Will Harris, I like Will Harris. I'm going to start with that because I think he, again, a Quinn type guy, tough. Go watch the Saints game when against these guys as to how he played and how he was very physical against these guys. I like what he can add. Now, Chin gets a 2-year deal for about almost 16.3 million. Harris gets a 2-year deal for about 8 million. That's kind of how the league values them. So that's why I go like, okay, the league would say there's a half step down there. But can Harris be better in coverage? I think he can, and that's where he can help. And so that's where you can sit there and make the case that, hey, maybe they're about the same. You lose a little bit here, but do you gain here? I think that's really going to be the key moving forward. Because if Harris does do well in coverage, now you have something that you didn't have as strong last year. So that's where he can help. And that's where, if that happens, then you can say, okay, maybe they didn't get the guy here, but they don't have the guy to help as much against the run. But can you mitigate that with maybe better defensive line play? Maybe with, if Keim becomes your big nickel type, that's where we go back to that. Or Dominique Hampton, for example. Maybe then you mitigate the loss of Chin by that way. And it's not like Chin was a Pro Bowl player here. He was a good player. He did not have a good year in Carolina the year before for whatever reason. They didn't use him as much. So it's not like, again, you have to put in perspective what it is they lost and who was a guy that I thought they'd resign because I thought he fit here. And a little bit surprised they didn't resign him. But I do like Harris. What can he get? Can he do enough in coverage to offset where I think Chin helped in that run game? And I like Quan Martin a lot. I just think he's a really smart player. Percy Butler, I felt like did a nice job. Do they have the depth here? That's something to work. Does Tyler Owens develop? They also have Jeremy Reeves. Obviously, we know what he can do, and he's a special teams stud. And that's what he is. So, you have Ben Nickel. So what does he do, right? Does he develop? He and Tyler Owens, those undrafted guys. But Tyler was a guy last year that I really liked. Is he just a special teams guy, or can he develop into a guy who can help them from scrimmage? So this will be a year where we start to see more of that, right? More answer to that question. But that's where I just wonder a little bit about with them is their depth at safety, and that's to me is the big question. So overall, this defense is better. The question is how much? Is it enough, right? And you look at the quarterbacks they're playing this year, and you got who I jotted down is Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Mahomes, Goff, Dak twice, Jalen twice. And then you get guys like Caleb Williams. Is he going to be much better with Ben Johnson? Bo Nix, JJ McCarthy. What's he going to be like? There's mystery there. You have Tua, and then you got the questions with the Giants, right? So there's some interesting games that, Geno Smith, although, some quarterbacks, like we're talking about different levels here, right? Like Mahomes, Herbert, Goff, Dak, those guys are just Jalen. They're at a different level than some of these other guys. So, anyways, but you want to, so they need to be better, and I think they are. Is it enough to say, okay, are they a top 10 defense? Well, no, I'm not looking at them like that. But can they be a quality defense? I think the answer is yes. So, and then it's just a matter, is it quality enough? And then offset that with the offense. But I do think they're better. And I think that you have some tough guys that they brought in. And I like that. You can do a lot of things with that. But I think the other key here is, will they take the ball away? Because they have to do that better. If they don't, that's where other issues start to arise, right? Like the sack totals are great and all that. Taking the ball away and stopping the run are two of the primary things for this defense. So and you can take the ball away by affecting the passer. Like that's something that Quinn has always talked about, right? Then can they do that enough with this group? And I think again, the depth of pass rushers is just greater. Will they get that guy who can get you the sack when you need it? Well, again, I don't, I know Dante Fowler had 10.5 sacks. I don't think he was necessarily that guy last year, right? So I don't think he was Myles Garrett, for example, and they don't have that guy. But by the way, and I know that leads into Trey Hendrickson, and I've told you before, I think there's some issues there, whether the capital they'd have to give up, but also you have guys on this roster that you need to extend. And I've talked to multiple people who have pointed out like that might not sit well if you go out and trade for Trey and give him an extension, and then you got Terry, Debo, Tunsil here, among others, who want those extensions or could use those. Do you take care of them? Because if you don't, that's when guys get upset. So, anyways, folks, that's it for me. I think the defense is better. Will it be better enough? Time will tell, as always, because it's only May and we've got to talk about this in this way. Long way, still a couple months to go. Anyways, folks, thanks for tuning in. Again, I'll be back on Tuesday with Santana Moss. And also for you Gold members, I will be doing another private Zoom on Thursday. So we'll do that 8 o'clock Thursday night. I will talk to you next time.